She was supposed to be rebuilding her life, finally free from her troubled past. Instead, she vanished. Gone, without a trace. A woman on the brink of a fresh start, only to be pulled back into a nightmare. Her husband. A man with a criminal past, an obsession, and a sinister plan. He wasn't willing to let her go, not without taking everything she had left. And when the authorities started asking questions, his web of lies began to unravel. What really happened to Anna Knežević? And what shocking twist in this case left everyone stunned? You won't believe what she did. This is a story of betrayal, greed, and a desperate fight for survival. Anna Knežević was a woman who had everything to live for, a thriving life, a promising future, and the chance to finally break free from a toxic relationship. At 40 years old, she was smart, independent, and determined to move on. But fate had other plans. She was originally from Colombia but had dual American citizenship, living in Florida before moving to Madrid, Spain. Why Madrid? Because she was in the middle of an ugly, drawn-out divorce with her husband, 36-year-old David Knežević. David wasn't just any estranged husband. He had secrets. Dark ones. And he was willing to do whatever it took to keep his fortune intact, even if it meant crossing a line no one ever expected. The couple had been married for 13 years, but their love had long since soured. And when Anna decided to leave, David realized that divorce wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about money. A lot of money. David had recently come into a $6 million windfall from selling real estate in Florida. But there was one major problem: if the divorce was finalized, Anna could walk away with a piece of his fortune. And for David, that was something he just couldn't allow. February 2nd. Madrid, Spain. Anna was last seen at her apartment. She had made plans for the future, excited about the next chapter of her life. But that day, she simply vanished. No calls. No messages. No signs of life. It was as if she had been wiped off the face of the earth. At first, David played the part of the concerned husband. He spoke to authorities, feigning shock and sorrow. But there was one big problem: his story didn't add up. Investigators began digging, and what they uncovered was more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. David had a history. A past that involved lies, manipulation, and control. And when the financial stakes were this high, authorities believed he was willing to go to terrifying lengths to make sure Anna, and her claim to his money, disappeared forever. As the investigation gained momentum, inconsistencies in David's story became impossible to ignore. The timeline didn't make sense. The evidence pointed in one direction, straight at him. Authorities soon discovered that David had been carefully planning something. Something cold, calculated, and irreversible, and when the truth finally came out, it shocked everyone. What did Anna do that no one expected? How did she turn the tables on her husband in a way no one saw coming? The night before Anna Knežević disappeared, she made a phone call. A brief, casual conversation with a friend. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She didn't sound distressed. She didn't mention anything unusual. And then, just like that, silence. No more calls. No more texts. No sign of life. It was February 2nd, and that call would be the last time anyone heard Anna's voice. The next day, on February 3rd, two of Anna's friends received an unexpected message from her phone. It wasn't a desperate plea for help. It wasn't even a goodbye. It was something much stranger. The message read, "I met someone wonderful. He has a summer house about 2 hours from Madrid. We're going there now, and I will spend a few days with him. Signal is spotty. I'll call you when I get back." Sounds innocent enough, right? Except it wasn't. One of those friends, Saa Rameau, immediately knew something was wrong. Saa had spoken to Anna just the night before. Anna had plans that didn't include running off with a mysterious man she had just met on the street. None of it made sense. It wasn't like Anna to cancel pre-arranged meetings without a word. It wasn't like her to vanish into thin air. And one glaring question haunted SAA from the moment she read that text: why would Anna leave everything behind, her apartment, her work, her friends, without telling anyone in person? Her gut told her something was terribly wrong. So, she called the police. On February 4th, concerned friends and authorities performed a wellness check at Anna's Madrid apartment. What they found, or rather, what they didn't find, was disturbing. Anna was gone. The apartment? Locked from the outside. Inside, everything was exactly as Anna had left it. There were no signs of struggle. No packed bags. No indications that she had planned a trip. Spanish investigators didn't waste time. Something wasn't adding up, and they knew they had to dig deeper. And then, they found it. The night Anna disappeared, a shadowy figure appeared on security footage near her apartment. A person wearing a helmet. A person who, minutes later, spray-painted over the security camera lens, erasing any trace of what was about to happen next. The footage was grainy, the details blurred, but one thing was clear: this wasn't random. Someone didn't want to be seen, and when the U.S. Attorney's Office analyzed the footage, they knew exactly who it was. David Nezevich. Anna's estranged husband, the same man who stood to lose millions of dollars if the divorce went through. The same man who had every reason to make sure Anna never got her share of his fortune. But that wasn't the only footage they found. Authorities quickly linked David to another security video, one that showed him walking into a store. His purchases? Duct tape spray paint, the same brand used to cover the security cameras. Other suspicious items that pointed to something sinister. He thought he had covered his tracks. He thought no one would find out. But then, his biggest mistake came to light. When questioned by authorities, David had a rock-solid alibi. Or so he thought. He told law enforcement that on the night Anna disappeared, he was in Serbia, far from Madrid, far from the crime scene. But there was just one problem. When investigators checked David's phone records, they didn't show him in Serbia. They didn't even show him in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where he had told SAA he was at the time. No, his phone pinged in Madrid. The very city where Anna had disappeared. The very place he swore he hadn't been. And then came the final nail in the coffin. Remember that suspicious message Anna's friends received? The one saying she had met a wonderful man and was heading to a summer house. Investigators proved it wasn't written by Anna. David had written it, and how did they know? Because in another shocking twist, David had actually hired someone to translate the message for him, a woman he met on a dating app. The woman, who spoke Spanish, was asked to translate the message from English to Spanish so it would sound authentic. She had no idea what she was helping him do. But once investigators uncovered her involvement, the truth became undeniable. David had staged everything. He had manipulated Anna's phone. He had lied to her friends and family. He had created a fake alibi, a false trail, all in an attempt to buy time and escape justice. But it wasn't enough, because by now, authorities weren't just suspicious. They were certain David Nezevich was behind Anna's disappearance. With mounting evidence against him, David's world began to collapse. His lies were exposed. His carefully crafted alibi fell apart. And now, the only question left was, where was Anna? What had he done to her? And in the most shocking twist of all, what Anna did next would leave everyone speechless. Authorities were closing in. The pressure was on, but just when they thought they had the full story, a new piece of evidence changed everything. Anna had one final move. Something no one expected. Something that would turn the entire case upside down. And when the truth came out, the world couldn't believe it. Like, share, and subscribe for more shocking real-life crime stories. David Nezevich thought he had committed the perfect crime. He had the money, the alibi, and a carefully crafted cover story. He had manipulated, deceived, and erased any trace of Anna's existence. But what he didn't count on was how the smallest details would bring everything crashing down. After Anna's disappearance, Spanish investigators started combing through every bit of evidence: phone records, surveillance footage, rental car logs, and what they found shattered David's alibi completely. The FBI now believes that David didn't just make Anna disappear. He had planned something far more sinister. Something calculated. Something premeditated. And the shocking part? It all began with a rental car. David had rented a car in Serbia, a seemingly harmless move. But what he didn't realize was that this single decision would undo him. When he returned the car, something stood out. Nearly 5,000 extra miles on the odometer. Tinted windows, a modification made after the car was rented. A striking resemblance to a vehicle spotted near Anna's Madrid apartment, driven by an unidentified person with stolen license plates. Authorities now believe David kidnapped Anna that night, forcing her out of her apartment under the cover of darkness. And it doesn't stop there. According to GPS data from his rental car, David didn't just take her out of Madrid. He drove for hours, across borders, across countries, until finally, northern Italy. The last known stop before the car returned to Serbia. Investigators suspect that somewhere in those remote Italian woods, Anna's body may still be hidden. But so far, she has never been found. For 3 long months, David thought he had gotten away with it. No body. No crime. No consequences. Then, in May, he made a fatal mistake. He landed at Miami International Airport. And waiting for him, the FBI. It was swift. It was calculated. And it was the moment David realized his lies had finally caught up with him. At first, authorities charged him only with kidnapping, nothing more. But everyone knew what this case was really about. And when federal agents started piecing together the full puzzle, it got even darker. Now, David Knežević isn't just facing a kidnapping charge. A federal grand jury has hit him with 3 new and far more serious charges: kidnapping resulting in death, domestic violence resulting in death, foreign murder of a U.S. national. If convicted, the death penalty is on the table. The stakes? Higher than ever. And here's where things get even more chilling. Investigators discovered one last piece of damning evidence. Remember that strange text message Anna's friends received? The one saying she had met a man and was heading to a summer house. David wrote it. And the way he did it? Unbelievable. He had met a Colombian woman on a dating app. He asked her to translate the message into Spanish. She had no idea she was helping cover up a crime. But now, that single message, a desperate attempt to mislead Anna's friends and family, is one of the strongest pieces of evidence proving his guilt. David thought he was outsmarting everyone. But in reality, he was leaving behind a trail of breadcrumbs. And the feds? They followed every single one. David Knežević is sitting in a jail cell, awaiting his fate. His past finally caught up with him. His lies exposed. His carefully constructed reality shattered. Now, only one question remains: will he face life in prison, or the death penalty? As prosecutors prepare for trial, the world is watching. That a man who thought he had it all, the money, the control, the ability to make people disappear, is now powerless. And as for Anna, she may be gone, but her story isn't over, because justice is coming and no amount of lies, money, or manipulation will stop it. David Knežević thought he had orchestrated the perfect crime. He thought he had wiped away every trace of evidence. No blood, no forced entry, no body. But there was just one problem: he left too many loose ends. Security footage, falsified texts, GPS data, and a trail of deception that only grew more damning with time. And now, after months of relentless investigation, David is no longer just a suspect. He's an indicted man, facing a courtroom where the stakes couldn't be higher. His lawyers argue there's no physical evidence tying him to Anna's murder. No DNA. No blood. No fingerprints at a crime scene. But prosecutors, they don't need it. Because what they have instead is something far more powerful, a story that makes too much sense to ignore. At first glance, it seems like a case built on circumstantial evidence. But when you put the pieces together, the picture is clear. A man in a helmet, caught on camera near Anna's apartment, disabling security footage, a man who looks exactly like David. A rental car in Serbia, returned with an extra 5,000 miles, and a suspicious GPS trail leading from Madrid to northern Italy. The same car spotted near Anna's home, but with tinted windows and stolen license plates. A phony text message, allegedly from Anna, written by David himself and translated by a woman he met online. And perhaps the most damning clue of all, the cover-up itself. Because here's the truth, people who are innocent don't spend this much time covering their tracks. The spray-painted cameras. The altered license plates. The fabricated text messages. Every action David took wasn't the act of a grieving husband, it was the act of a man trying to erase a crime. And jurors? They won't have a hard time connecting the dots. David's attorneys are banking on one major argument: there's no crime scene. No forced entry. No bloodstains. No DNA proving a struggle inside Anna's apartment. But prosecutors have an answer for that too. Because not all murders are messy. A carefully planned killing, one involving strangulation, suffocation, or a method leaving no trace, could explain the eerily undisturbed scene. And Anna's locked apartment? That only makes it more suspicious. Firefighters had to break down the door to enter. The apartment had been sealed from the outside. If Anna had left willingly, how did she lock herself in from the outside? The answer: she didn't. Someone else locked that door. Someone who wanted to make it look like she had simply walked away. And now, there's only one person who fits that role perfectly. Motive isn't required for a murder conviction. But jurors? They always want an answer to why. Why would David, a man who had been married to Anna for 13 years, do this? Money. David had just liquidated his real estate assets. $6 million in sales. Millions at stake in a divorce settlement. And Anna? She was entitled to a share. David had a choice: give up half of his fortune, or make sure she never got a cent. For a man like David, money was everything. And the moment Anna filed for divorce, she became a threat. A problem that needed to be handled. The case against David has now escalated far beyond a missing persons case. He's no longer just a suspect. He's an indicted man, facing 3 charges that could put him on death row. Kidnapping resulting in death. Domestic violence resulting in death. Foreign murder of a U.S. national. The grand jury's decision to indict was no surprise. These proceedings happen behind closed doors. The defense isn't present. And prosecutors? They bring everything they have. It only takes a simple majority to indict. And in this case, it wasn't even close. David Knežević is officially a man on trial for his life. This isn't a normal murder case. It spans 3 countries, Spain, Italy, and Serbia. It involves multiple law enforcement agencies. And most importantly, Anna's body has never been found. Does that make conviction harder? Absolutely. But not impossible. The FBI, Spanish authorities, and Italian law enforcement are all working together, sharing every piece of evidence they've gathered. David's defense will argue that without a body, prosecutors don't have proof that Anna is actually dead. But the overwhelming evidence suggests otherwise. And if there's one thing we know about cases like this, juries don't need a body to convict a killer. There's one final question looming over this case. If David is convicted, will he face the death penalty? Federal law allows it for cases of kidnapping resulting in death. But the decision isn't made lightly. It's not up to the judge. It's not up to the jury. It's up to the United States Attorney General. If the government decides to seek the death penalty, David won't just be fighting for his freedom. He'll be fighting for his life. And with a case this high profile, with stakes this high, that decision could come sooner than anyone expects. David Knežević was a man who thought he could control everything. His money. His ex-wife. His fate. But in the end, his own arrogance destroyed him. Every lie, every deception, every attempt to cover his tracks, only led authorities straight to him. And now, he's sitting in a prison cell, waiting for a trial that will determine whether he spends the rest of his life behind bars, or faces a punishment far worse. One thing is certain, the walls are closing in. And for the man who tried to erase Anna from existence, justice is coming. If you found this case shocking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More true crime stories are coming soon. He thought he had pulled off the perfect crime. No body, no physical evidence, and an airtight alibi, or so he believed. But what David Knežević didn't realize was that every move he made was being tracked. Every lie he told was slowly unraveling. And now, after months of investigation, he's facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars, or worse. From the moment Anna disappeared, the authorities knew something was off. The apartment locked from the outside. A suspicious figure seen spray painting security cameras. A rental car with thousands of unexplained miles. And yet, David thought he had outsmarted everyone. He even had the audacity to fly back to the United States, believing he was untouchable. But the second he landed at Miami International Airport, his illusion of control shattered. FBI agents were waiting, and before he even had a chance to process what was happening, he was in cuffs. At first, the charges were limited to kidnapping. But that was just the beginning. Prosecutors were playing the long game, gathering every shred of evidence before unleashing their most devastating move yet, a federal grand jury indictment for 3 charges that could seal his fate forever. Kidnapping resulting in death. Domestic violence resulting in death. Foreign murder of a U.S. national. This is no longer just about a missing woman. This is about a calculated, cold-blooded crime, one that could lead to the ultimate punishment. But here's the twist, David still believes he can walk away from this. He's pleaded not guilty. His attorneys claim the case is built on circumstantial evidence. No body. No blood. No direct forensic proof that he killed Anna. And without that, they argue, how can prosecutors prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt? But the evidence tells a different story. Surveillance footage shows someone who looks exactly like David tampering with cameras near Anna's apartment. A rental car in Serbia, returned with 5,000 extra miles and GPS data placing it near the last known location of Anna. A text message, supposedly from Anna, saying she was running off with a new man, only it wasn't her who sent it. David had asked a woman on a dating app to translate it into Spanish. And that's just the beginning. The FBI believes David didn't just kill Anna, he planned it meticulously. They think he forced her into a suitcase, carried her out of the apartment undetected, and drove her across borders before dumping her body somewhere in the remote wilderness of northern Italy. But without a body, will a jury convict? David's defense team is already preparing their strategy. They'll argue that while the evidence may look bad, it doesn't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he murdered Anna. They'll question the lack of a crime scene, the absence of DNA, and the reliance on circumstantial evidence. But prosecutors don't need a smoking gun. They only need to tell a story that makes sense. A man set to lose millions in a bitter divorce. A missing ex-wife who stood in the way of his fortune. A suspicious cover-up that only made him look more guilty. And a trail of digital breadcrumbs leading straight to him. David's lawyers have also been fighting to get him released on bond, claiming he's not a flight risk. But the judge isn't buying it. A man who has lived overseas, who has connections across multiple countries, who allegedly committed a crime that spanned 3 nations, this is someone who could vanish without a trace if given the chance. And prosecutors are making one thing clear: there will be no deal. This isn't a manslaughter case. It's not a crime of passion. This is first-degree, premeditated murder. David is staring down 2 options: life in prison, or the death penalty. And that decision? It's in the hands of the U.S. Attorney General. The government rarely pursues the death penalty in cases like these. But this crime? The planning, the cover-up, the fact that Anna's body may never be found, it may be enough for them to push for the ultimate punishment. As the trial approaches, one thing is certain: David's confidence, the same arrogance that made him think he could get away with this, may be the very thing that destroys him. Because no matter how well he covered his tracks, no matter how carefully he crafted his lies, justice has a way of catching up. And this time, there's nowhere left to run. David is due back in court next week for his arraignment, where he will formally enter his plea. His attorneys say he maintains his innocence. But with the mountain of evidence stacking against him, the question isn't whether he's guilty, it's how long he can keep pretending he's not. This case is far from over, and as the prosecution moves full speed ahead, one thing is becoming increasingly clear: Anna may be gone. But David's nightmare is only just beginning.